David and Goliath is more than a story of victory against impossible odds. It is a confrontation between fear and faith, a moment in history where the unseen proved stronger than the visible. It is a reminder that the greatest battles are often not fought with swords, but within the human heart. In every generation, people face giants, forces that appear too powerful to challenge. These giants wear different faces: fear, poverty, injustice, sickness, insecurity, rejection, doubt. They loom large, speak loudly, and intimidate relentlessly. This ancient story invites us to ask an uncomfortable question: what happens when fear controls our decisions, and what changes when faith takes its place? The scene opens in the Valley of Elah. Two armies stand on opposite hills, the Israelites on one side and the Philistines on the other. Between them lies a wide valley, silent but tense, waiting for bloodshed. The air is thick with anticipation. Every soldier knows what is coming, yet no one moves. The Philistines had a secret weapon. His name was Goliath of Gath. He was massive in stature, towering over ordinary men, wrapped in bronze armor that gleamed under the sun. His helmet, breastplate, and greaves were designed not only for protection, but for intimidation. His spear was thick and heavy, like a weaver's rod, and his shield-bearer walked ahead of him. But more frightening than his size was his voice. When Goliath spoke, his words rolled across the valley like thunder. Each morning and evening, Goliath stepped forward and issued the same challenge. "Choose a man and send him to fight me. If he defeats me, we will serve you. But if I defeat him, you will serve us." It was psychological warfare. Not a single sword was lifted, yet fear spread like wildfire. For 40 days, his words echoed. And for 40 days, no one answered. The army of Israel, once known for courage and victories, stood frozen. Even King Saul, taller than any man in Israel, anointed to lead, felt powerless. Scripture says that when Saul and the Israelites heard Goliath's words, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Fear had stripped the soldiers of their identity. They no longer remembered who they were, or whose they were. This was not merely a military standoff. It was a spiritual crisis. The armies were not just afraid of Goliath. They had forgotten who stood with them. They saw the size of the enemy, but not the greatness of their God. They measured the battle by human strength instead of divine promise. Far away from the battlefield, a young shepherd named David lived a quiet life. He watched the sheep, played his harp, and spent long hours alone in prayer with God. David was the youngest son in his family, often overlooked, rarely taken seriously. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, David was not even invited into the room. Yet his solitude shaped him. In the fields, David learned courage the hard way. He learned responsibility, patience, and trust. When predators came, lions or bears, there was no audience, no applause, no recognition. Only David, his flock, and God. Those hidden moments became training ground for faith. Long before David faced a giant, he learned how to stand firm when fear appeared. One day, David's father Jesse sent him to deliver food to his brothers who were camped near the battlefield. David obeyed, unaware that he was stepping into a moment that would define his destiny. He left the sheep with a keeper and carried bread and cheese toward the valley of conflict. As David arrived, he heard shouting from the battlefield. He saw the armies assembling, the tension in their faces, the unease in their movements. Then Goliath emerged once again. David watched as seasoned soldiers, men trained for war, retreated in fear. David listened carefully, and something stirred within him. While others heard intimidation, David heard defiance. While others saw a giant, David saw a challenge to God's honor. He asked the men around him, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" His question revealed the difference between David and everyone else. David did not define the situation by Goliath's size, but by God's covenant. To David, this was not just an enemy. It was an insult against the living God. His words angered his brothers, especially his eldest brother, Eliab. They accused him of arrogance, questioning his motives. "Why have you come down here?" they asked. "And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?" But David was not seeking glory. He was seeking understanding. "Is there not a cause?" he replied. David recognized that silence in the face of fear only strengthens the giant. Word reached King Saul, and David was brought before him. Saul looked at David and saw only a boy, young, inexperienced, untested in war. "You cannot fight this man," Saul said. "You are young, and he has been a warrior from his youth." David responded calmly, without anger or defensiveness. He spoke of lions and bears, of moments when fear could have won, but didn't. He explained how God had delivered him again and again in private battles. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear," David said, "will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." David's confidence was not rooted in himself, but in memory. He remembered what God had done before, and trusted him to do again. Reluctantly, Saul agreed. He dressed David in royal armor, placing a helmet on his head and fastening a sword at his side. But the armor was heavy and unfamiliar. David tried to walk, but he could barely move. He removed the armor. It was not his calling. It was not his identity. David refused to fight someone else's battle in someone else's way. He understood that faith does not require imitation. It requires obedience. Instead, David chose what he knew. He took his staff, his sling, and selected 5 smooth stones from a nearby stream. This choice was not weakness, it was wisdom. David trusted the tools shaped by experience and faith, not appearances. As David stepped into the valley, Goliath saw him and laughed. The giant mocked him, cursing him by his gods and questioning why a boy had been sent instead of a warrior. "Come here," Goliath shouted, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David did not flinch. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin," David replied. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David declared that the battle belonged to God, not to size, strength, or weapons. He spoke victory before it happened, not because he was reckless, but because he trusted completely. As Goliath advanced, David ran toward him, not away. In that moment, faith outran fear. Reaching into his pouch, David placed a stone into his sling and released it with precision. The stone struck Goliath's forehead. The giant staggered, then fell face down to the ground. The valley fell silent. Then the impossible happened. The Israelites erupted with a shout. The Philistines turned and fled, and Israel surged forward in victory. One act of faith broke 40 days of fear. In a single moment, fear lost its power. David, once overlooked and underestimated, became a symbol of courage, not because he was fearless, but because he trusted God completely. He showed an entire nation that faith is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. This story reminds us that giants are not defeated by strength alone. They fall when faith refuses to retreat. David did not deny the danger. He simply believed that God was greater. And so, David and Goliath continues to speak across generations, calling ordinary people to face extraordinary challenges with unwavering faith. Because sometimes the battle is not about defeating the giant in front of us, but about remembering who stands beside us. And when we remember that no giant can stand for long,